فإن قيل فنحن نجد وطالبين يجدون الأرزاق والأموال وتاركين يعلمون ويفتقرون. So just carrying on the section of rizq. Jamil, you missed last week. They covered a lot of the questions that you were asking before. And we were saying last week it was good if you were here.
Unfortunately, I was seeking my rizq last week.
But I think still some of them will be still answered more further as well. There's actually the exact questions that you were asking someone else.
What was the answers correct that we'd said before? That
Inshallah, like he said, for example, if someone were to ask, does a slave have to go out to look for rizq in any case? It also asks the question, if someone were to say that reward and punishment is also written for us in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, but we still have to do either good or bad action, so just because the rizq is already written, why does it mean we don't have to? Well, actually, ثُمَّ يَلْزَمُنَا تَلَبُهُ وَيَزِيدُ وَبِطَلَبُ. So, why do you say that rizq doesn't increase or decrease if we go out to seek more of it and things like that? Alhamdulillah, it's similar to what we already said, I think, anyway. So the next question, this is linked as well. It says, if someone were to say, look, we find in our real life experience that someone who does go out to look to work for more and more rizq, they get more wealthy, and people who don't make that extra effort, you find that they end up with less money and so on. Yeah? And then so al-Ghazali rahimahullah says, قيل له كأنك لا تجد مع ذلك طالبا محروما فقيرا أو فارغا مرزوقا غنيا بل هذا هو الأكثر. So Imam al-Ghazali's response to that is, he said, but are you saying that you've never meet people who actually go and make that extra effort, but they don't get extra wealth, And are you saying that you don't find any people who don't make that extra effort striving after wealth, and yet they still seem to get lots of wealth? You see what I mean? If you're saying you find these type of people, but you also in the world you find those other type of people, and he says actually those are more. So you find these people who struggling, striving, trying to make money, trying to start businesses or whatever, and they fail. A lot of people do fail. A lot of people don't get anywhere with those things. And you find a lot of people who maybe didn't make all that amount of effort, but then for whatever reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put a lot of barakah in their rizq, in their business, and they were successful. I think everyone has realized that most people who become wealthy, often it's just certain things come into place for them. Yeah? That don't come into place for other people. Things that are beyond your control, really. There's so many factors that are beyond our control in our lives. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will often show us as well, things will happen to us during our lifetimes to give us these signs, that these things are not in your hand. So we have to take lessons from those incidents, those events that take place. وأنشدني أبو بكر محمد بن سابق الصقلي الواعظ رحمه الله تعالى بالشام وكم قوي في تقلبه محذب الرأي عنه الرزق منحرف وكم ضعيف في تقلبه كأنه من خليج البحر يختلف هذا دليل على أن الإله له في الخلق سر خفي ليس ينكشف فاحمد إلهك في ضيق وفي سعة ولا تعاند ولا تعاند فما الأرزاق تختلف. I don't have that in English.
How many strong, courageous and wise men there are who remain poor, and how many weak, inactive and simple men there are who bring out handfuls of gems from the bottom of the seas. This is a proof that in the matter of sustenance, exalted Allah has some scheme for the people which human intelligence is unable to understand. The last line, I haven't got that.
So praise your God when you are in constrained circumstances and in expanded circumstances, and do not be rebellious or ungrateful, because the arzaq, the provisions, the wealth is already decided. So this poem, these lines of poetry also pointing out the same point that Imam al-Ghazali made, that sometimes you'll find the most unlikely of people making lots of wealth, and most people that you would have thought would have done being very successful will not be, and that these are the signs to show us the situation. فهل قلت فهل أدخل البادية بلا زاد. This is another one as well. He says, if someone were to say, okay, then should I go into the desert without any provision with me? Yeah? Should I go into the desert without taking anything with me, if you're saying that everything is already to be provided? And alhamdulillah, Imam al-Ghazali gives a very similar explanation to what I was mentioning the other few weeks ago. He says, فَأَقُولُ إِنْ كَانَ لَكَ قوة قلب بالله والثقة والبالغة بوعد الله فادخل وإلا فكن كالعوام بعلائقهم. So very similar. Remember I was talking about Khalid ibn al-Walid, and if you have that type of iman, then you will do that. You wouldn't need to ask anyone, and no one will tell you to do that, you know. So similarly, Imam al-Ghazali says, if you have the strength of belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then go. And you don't need to take any provision with you. But if not, then you remain amongst the normal people with their ala'iq, with their normal attachments. You know, they attach their rizq to certain things. You know, and they're unable to break completely free of that because of not having that strength of iman. وَلَقَدْ سَمِعْتُ الْإِمَامَ أَبَا الْمَعَالِي رَحِمَهُ اللَّهُ يَقُولُ إن من جرى مع الله تعالى على عادة الناس جرى الله معه على ما هو عادة الناس في كفاية المؤنة. He says, I heard from one Imam Abu al-Ma'ali, he said, whoever's dealings with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are according to the norms of people, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will apply to him the norms of what people live by, with respect to rizq and so on. So in other words, if you're of a state of iman where you're still attached to all of these means, you know, through which rizq comes, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make that a reality for you. Whereas if you're of a state of iman where you're completely immersed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one that is the creator, He's the only one who has any actions, you know? He creates you and your actions. If you're immersed in that belief, in that strength of that belief, that He created all of us and all of our actions, and nothing moves except by the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then He will make that a reality for you. And then you will see the reality of that. and how you will be provided in ways that you never expect. And this is a sort of a general principle of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deals with His slaves, according to their opinion of Him. Yeah? As it says in the Hadith Qudsi, أَنَا عِنْدَ ظَنِّ عَبْدِي بِي, I am according to my slave's expectation of me or thinking of me. In other words, if you think good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will deal with you good. If you think badly of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a great sin, then He will deal with you harshly. You know? So if you think good of Allah, that Allah is merciful, Allah is good, Allah would not do any bad to His creation, Allah would not do any injustice to His creation, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will deal with you in the way that you have this good opinion of Him. So it's very important to always have good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then He will be very merciful to you and He will deal with you. But if you start, may Allah protect us, of having bad opinions of Allah, that He is unjust, why is He doing these things, why is He causing this, or why is He causing me to have this, you fall into bad opinions, then He will deal with you more with justice. In other words, you will be more punished for your sins, than which all of us commit.
Can I just ask, it might be linked to the previous one, but he said that you're working and it doesn't make any difference to your risk, which is guaranteed. But before that he said that you should work because it's been commanded for you. But what, is that because it's like a far, what, I mean, did he talk about why, in what context it's been commanded, or because you don't have to work if you've got money, do you?
Yeah, no. In this particular chapter, he hasn't mentioned about work. That was just from myself. That,
right.
It's one of the obligations to provide rizq for our families. In this chapter, he hasn't touched on that, and I think the reason is because in this chapter he's trying to draw people away from their attachments to means.
Yeah.
And he's trying to tell us that you have to have tawakkul. So he's not gone into that so far. But yeah, no, that's the thing. If you don't need to work and you already have money, then you don't need to work.
But what is the answer to the question of how do you know when it's an obligation, or what qualifies this as an obligation? Is there some general statement or?
Yes, I mean it's obligatory for a man to provide for his wife and his children. That's established from the Sunnah, probably from the Quran as well. Al-Rijalu qawwamuna 'ala an-nisa, etc. So that's obligatory. That's by consensus obligatory for a man to provide for his wife and children.
But if you join the two concepts together, which is it's obligatory to provide, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guarantee the provision, then you could argue that I don't need to work because the provision is guaranteed, and Allah will provide and I will provide, So there must be some bridge to explain, maybe there isn't, I don't know, but there must be some indication to say that it's obligatory for you to go and use the means that you would expect to provide rizq in order to fulfill that duty. Otherwise you would say, I'm not going to work, Allah will provide. And you could extend that to your family. And you could say that if you've got a very high level of iman, then you don't need to work. Like Abu Bakr Siddiq, you gave the example last time.
Yeah.
He said he gave everything and left Allah and His Messenger. But
that's a good example because Abu Bakr Siddiq did work. He was going out to trade. Even when he became the Khalifa, on the next day, they saw him going out to the market to earn his rizq. So that's a good example. And who could have an iman stronger than Abu Bakr? So.
Isn't this linked to the whole, the hadith about tying a camel and trusting in Allah?
Exactly,
right?
yeah. That's right, yeah.
So you sort of trusting in Allah, but then have to make the efforts.
I mean, it'd be interesting to know if there's a hadith or some indication where it clearly says you should go and work. I mean, I've read a lot of hadith which says about the benefits of trade, the benefits of work, etc. And
Well,
But are they the ones that you refer to say that I have to go and work because I have to support my family?
No, the thing is, in situations like this where you have text, which may be interpreted in different ways, you then look to the Sunnah, because that's the interpretation of the text in real practical example.
Yeah.
And the Sahaba are the best example. So you look at the Sahaba, all of them were going out to work to earn their rizq. But at the same time, when there was needed for the deen, sacrifice for the deen was needed, they were sacrificing that, giving, spending it, and then trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When there was a need for jihad, they were leaving behind their families and businesses and going out and fighting against the enemy and trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, you see what I mean? There's like a balance. So it's all to do with balance, and it's all to do with looking at the Sunnah. But in real terms, I think it's more to do with how much you put into working for dunya, we think, and that's the thing the Prophet ﷺ said repeatedly in the Sahih Hadith about this ummah, that he was feared for us of rushing after the dunya. Love of the dunya is a thing that will destroy this ummah as it destroyed those before us. So you're not going to have that problem. You're not going to have a problem with Muslims saying, oh, actually I don't need to work. I just trust in Allah. That's why Imam al-Ghazali doesn't need to address that problem. That's not the problem. The problem is that Muslims are too much into love of the world. So that's why you teach them these things, to try to explain to them that this is not what's required of you. What we should do is work to fulfill our basic needs for us and our family, and then whatever time and energy and resources we have above that, we should try to devote to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to working for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what we should do,
And then the question of basic needs obviously revolves around different things like where you are and the environment, what are the needs. And as we said last time about, you have to think about where is the best in the akhirah in terms of deciding where that lies. And then would it be true to say that each person's got their own situation that needs to be considered individually?
Yeah, I think so.
They have to make,
Everyone's got an individual, unique case, but these are just general principles. Anything that we take from this world that is over and above very basic needs, like even in one hadith it mentioned even the cold water will be asked about. If we have normal water, which is like room temperature, that's like the basic need. But if we have cold water, like so it's been refrigerated, that would be considered extra. So that's na'im. That would, asked about that. Not saying that you'd be punished for it, but it's something asked about. Your hasab, something you'd be taken into account for, including all the money that we have, whatever we spend, will be taken into account for it. Not necessarily that you'll be punished if you spend it on something permissible, but it would be something you'd be taken into account for. فإن قلت أليس الله تعالى يقول وتزودوا فإن خير الزاد التقوى. So he said, then if this person who asked the question about should I go into the desert without any provision, and Imam al-Ghazali said, if you have got that extremely strong iman and tawakkul, then go ahead. But if you haven't, then you're still attached to the normal things of the world, then that's not for you. But he says, if this person were then to come back with a refutation with this ayah of Quran, وَتَزَوَّدُوا فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ زَادِ التَّقْوَى. So it says in the Quran regarding the Hajj specifically, وَتَزَوَّدُوا, take your provision. Make sure you have your provision. And the best provision is taqwa. Surah Al-Baqarah. فَأَعْلَمَ أَنَّ فِيهِ قَوْلَيْنِ. Imam al-Ghazali says there are two opinions concerning this ayah. أَحَدُهُمَا أَنَّهُ زَادُ الْآخِرَةِ. One opinion is that here there's the provision that is mentioned in the ayah, it actually means provision for the akhirah. It's talking about provision for the akhirah. وَتَزَوَّدُوا. Make ready your provision for the akhirah. وَلِذَلِكَ قَالَ خَيْرُ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then added, the best provision is taqwa. وَلَمْ يَقُلْ حِتَامَ الدُّنْيَا وَأَسْبَابِهَا. وَلَمْ يَقُلْ حِتَامَ الدُّنْيَا وَأَسْبَابَهَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't mention the worldly provisions there. He said taqwa when he mentioned the specific. والثاني أنه كان قوم لا يأخذون زادا في طريق الحج لأنفسهم اتكالا على الناس. So the second opinion of this ayah is, it refers to certain people who used to go for Hajj, but they didn't take any provision, but they would become a burden on the people they were traveling with. You know, they would rely upon other people that they were traveling with on the Hajj and take their provision. وَيَسْأَلُونَ وَيُلِحُّونَ وَيُؤْذُونَ النَّاسِ. So they were like beggars and so on. They were like persisting in asking people and harming their companions. فَأُمِرُوا بِالزَّادِ أَمْرُ تَنْبِيهِ. So this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, it's more appropriate to take your provision. أَلَا أَنَّ أَخْذَ الزَّادِ مِنْ مَالِكَ خَيْرٌ مِنْ أَخْذِ مَالِ النَّاسِ. It's better to have your own provision than to have to ask other people. والاتكال عليهم وكذلك نقول فإن قلتها فالمتوكل هل يحمل الزاد في الأسفار. So the next question, once again related to all these, is that if someone were to say, the person who has got tawakkul, the person who has reached this maqam of tawakkul, trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, should he take any provision with him when he goes on a journey? فاعلم أنه ربما يحمل وزاد ولا يؤلق القلب به لأنه لا محالة رزقه. He says, Imam al-Ghazali says then, look, such a person who trusts in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he can still, doesn't mean he doesn't carry any provision with him. He can still carry provision with him, but the key thing is that his heart is not related to that. His heart is not convinced that this thing I'm carrying is going to be my rizq. Because he could get robbed. Yeah? He could lose that provision that he's carrying with him. Yeah? Anything can happen within the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وفيه قوامه وإنما يعلق القلب بالله تعالى ويتوكل عليه ويقول إن الرزق مقسوم مفروع منه. His heart is only linked to the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says to himself that this, almost my rizq is already predetermined. مفروخ منه, I think it must be. والله تعالى إن شاء أقام بنيتي بهذا أو بغيره. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills, this thing I'm carrying may be my provision to my sustenance, or if He wills, it might be something else that will be my sustenance. وربما يحمل بنية أخرى وربما يحمل بنية أخرى بأن يعين مسلما ونحو ذلك. So this could be one reason why such a person is carrying provision with him. Another reason is he could be doing it with another intention. That he's carrying this along with him on the journey because he wants to help other Muslims, or give sadaqah and so on. وليس الشأن في أخذ الزاد وتركه إنما شأن في القلب. He said the issue is not whether the person is carrying provision or not. The issue is of where your heart is reliant upon. لا تؤلق قلبك إلا بوعد الله تعالى وحسن كفايته وضمانه. Do not attach your heart to anything except for the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The promise of Allah that He will provide for you. In the Quran that we've already mentioned, the ayahs of Quran, where Allah mentions categorically that He provides for the slave. فكم من حامل الزاد دون الله تعالى وكم من تارك وقلبه مع الزاد دون الله تعالى. How many people there are that are actually carrying their provision, but their hearts are attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And how many people that don't have any provision with them, but their hearts are not with Allah, their hearts are with provision. In other words, just because someone is carrying provision with them, it doesn't mean that he is from the category of those who don't trust in Allah. You may have met some poor people that are very poor and they have no provision with them, but they don't have that trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they're going around begging and so on. فافهم هذه الأصول تكفي المؤنة إن شاء الله تعالى. So it says, understand these principles and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of your provision inshallah ta'ala. فإن قيل فالنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يحمل الزاد وكذلك أصحابه والسلف الصالح. What if someone were to ask a question? The Prophet ﷺ used to carry provision when he used to go on journey, and so did the Sahaba and the righteous Salaf. This is, this is an extended discussion because in the past, some of the Sufis were famous for going out to places without any rizq or anything. They would go to mountains or deserts or things like that. As I mentioned before, this is not the norm of how people should behave or expect to behave. There's two reasons why someone would do that. One is if he was overcome by a state of complete, what you might call fana or tawakkul, trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where he sees nothing but Allah's movements in creation, then he will just go spontaneously. He will not ask anyone and no one will tell him to. That's just the state he's in. And the second is if his sheikh or his guide, spiritual guide, has told him to do that, and then the spiritual guide has taken that decision upon himself. And normally it would be for a certain amount of time as a training for the nafs to suppress the desires of the nafs, a very severe training. These are the sort of things people used to do. I've told this story many times about Shaykh al-Darqawi, one of the famous Moroccan Sufis. I believe he was Moroccan, North African Sufis anyway, but he travelled across anyway, but he was one of the great scholars of that science, of about 2 centuries back, and he writes in his book some of his rasail, like his letters that he wrote, advice to his disciples. He wrote about when he first went for meet his sheikh. His sheikh was called al-Jamal, and he was in a zawiyah, where people come for the spiritual guidance in those days. And he said, the students that used to come, the sheikh used to tell them to do different type of jobs to make them more humble, khidmah, like serving people, serving the zawiyah, serving people. He said one of the worst jobs was to clean out the toilets. And he saw some of the students had to do that. They would empty out and then carry it on their back and go and dump it somewhere far away. But the sheikh said to him to do that. When he came first time in front of the sheikh, he was going to clean the toilets. But he said to him, you have to carry the bucket in front of you, not behind you. So you have to carry it in front of him. And he said in the book, there's a book, it's translated in English. It's called the Darqawi Way. And he says, when I had to do this, it became so difficult. Like he almost broke down. He said it was so difficult for me, I was about to just abandon the whole thing and run off. But then he forced himself to go through that thing. So that was a very, very extreme measure to completely kill any pride that was left in him.
Or sense of smell.
Any sense of smell or sense of pride that was left in him was completely destroyed. You can imagine doing that. So these are the type of things that would happen. So this is why Imam al-Ghazali is going to do like an extended discussion, because people were criticizing the Sufis for this thing, why they're going out in the deserts without any provision. This is not from the Sunnah, this is not from our deen, and so on. So that's why he's answering these questions. So a valid question. This was not. We don't see the Sahaba having done this. When they went on journeys, they were taking provision with them and so on. So why would you say that should be done? So he says, لا جرم أن ذلك مباح غير حرام. He said, of course this is permissible. It's not haram to carry provision with you. إنما الحرام تعليق القلب بالذات. The thing which is haram is for your heart to be reliant upon anything in creation apart from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَتَرْكُ التَّوَكُّلِ عَلَى اللَّهِ سُبْحَانَهُ فَافْعَلْ ذَلِكَ. Because why? Because we're commanded to believe and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the one who provides for us. And definitely the Sahaba were of that nature. But yeah, like Irfan mentioned earlier, this is summed up in that beautiful hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. When one of the Sahaba came in and said to the Prophet ﷺ, I trusted Allah but my camel ran off. He didn't tie the camel. I trust in Allah. So you can see how, it's an instance, like I was saying earlier, the text can be interpreted in different ways. But where do we find the way to act is by looking at the practical, living example, which is the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, the great Sahaba. Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha in that beautiful, amazing statement said, his khuluq was the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ, his character was the Quran. He was the one who was embodying and living the Quran. Otherwise, if we go to the Quran without the Prophet ﷺ, the text can be interpreted in so many different ways. We may fall into so many different deviations like people did. Like the Jabariyah, the Qadariyah, they didn't understand this issue. This is the issue where most people deviate. So Imam al-Tahawi rahmahullah in his Aqidah spends an extended amount of time on this issue of the Qadar and the free will. Because it is the issue where most people can go astray. So look at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then teaches us how to implement, or how the reality of this comes about. Yes, tie your camel, he said to the man. Tie your camel and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Similarly, I heard from one of the sheikhs in Syria, it's amazing, one of the lessons we get from the hijrah, the hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is one of those very defining events in our history, and one of the big lessons we learn from the hijrah is precisely this, to take the means. Trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but take your means, take your precautions. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he left left Mecca, he left in the opposite direction to Medina. Why? Because he knew that Quraysh are going to be searching in that direction. He left in the opposite direction. He was walking through with Abu Bakr, and every day the son of Abu Bakr was coming with his goats and covering up their tracks. So they were taking all the means and precautions not to be caught. The Prophet ﷺ could have easily said, I trust in Allah, and walked straight to Medina, and openly, no one could have harmed him. No one could have harmed him, because he was the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He had the most tawakkul. But why? Because it's a lesson for us. It's a sunnah. He's establishing sunnah. This is how we behave. So they done all those precautions. They went into the cave, and look at the beauty of it, because they took all those precautions, but still the Quraysh found them. The Quraysh, having hired out the best tracker of all the Bedouins of Arabia. He tracked them and he found them and he brought them right next to the cave. Yeah? He brought them right next to the cave despite all of those precautions that they had taken. Why? Once again teaching us a lesson that despite all of those precautions, the thing that actually saved them was their tawakkul. Because of that, obviously that 100% tawakkul that the Prophet ﷺ had and Sayyidina Abu Bakr had, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved them by a miraculous event of the spider and the pigeon. And one of the nice things I saw in the book of fiqh, in the Hanafi fiqh, they mention about pigeons in masjids. But I can't remember the exact details of that. But so that was teaching us, that so we take the precautions, but don't rely upon them. Yeah? It was only the reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that saved the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. ثم ما ظنك برسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم حيث قال الله تعالى له وتوكل على الحي الذي لا يموت. And then on the other side, don't forget, in the seerah we also know that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Sahaba used to guard his house at night. When they start getting a lot of friction with the non-believers, until the ayah was revealed. فَسَيَكْفِيكَهُمُ اللَّهُ فَسَيَكْفِيكَهُمُ اللَّهُ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be sufficient for you against them. وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ, and He is the hearing and the knowing. When this ayah was revealed, the Prophet ﷺ told Sahaba, don't guard the house. So you can see the converse there as well. That the Prophet ﷺ, because of the ayah, he no longer had to then use those means. So then Imam al-Ghazali says, what do you think about the Prophet ﷺ, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to him, وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى الْحَيِّ الَّذِي لَا يَمُوتُ, trust in the one who is alive and does not die. أَعَصَاءُ فِي ذَلِكَ وَعَلَّقَ قَلْبَهُ بِتَعَامٍ أَوْ شَرَابٍ أَوْ دِرْهَمٍ أَوْ دِينَارٍ. Do you think the Prophet ﷺ was disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and putting his trust or his faith in food and drink and dirhams and dinars? كَلَّا وَحَاشَ أَنْ يَكُونَ ذَلِكَ. He says no, and in no way could that be the case. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded the Prophet ﷺ, وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى الْحَيِّ الَّذِي لَا يَمُوتُ, trust in the one who is alive and does not die. There's no way you can say that the Prophet ﷺ was then trusting or relying upon anything else other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. بَلْ كَانَ قَلْبُهُ مَعَ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى, his heart was completely with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَتَوَكَّلُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ تَعَالَى, his trust was in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فإنه الذي لم يلتفت إلى الدنيا بأسرها ولم يمد يده إلى مفاتيح خزائنها كلها. He was the one who didn't even turn towards the dunya or anything of the dunya, of this worldly existence. He did not extend his hand towards the keys of the treasures of the earth, which were given to him. وإنما كان أخذ الزاد منه عليه الصلاة والسلام ومن السلف الصالح بنيات الخير لنيات الخير لا لميل قلوبهم عن الله تعالى إلى الزاد. So when we see in the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ that he has certain worldly possessions, or we see this from the Sahaba, we see that they have these things with intentions to do good, to give sadaqah or to spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not because their hearts are attached towards these worldly pleasures. والمعتبر القصد على ما علمناك فانتبه فانتبه من رقدتك. Yeah, so he says, Imam al-Ghazali, this is what we have already explained, is what you should understand and take into consideration. فإن قلت أيهما أفضل أخذ زاد أم تركه. So he says, even going a step further, for people like Dr. Jamil who might ask this type of thing, which is better? Yeah? Which is better, to take your provision with you, or to leave it if you're going on a journey, let's say, for example? فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ هَذَا يَخْتَلِفُ بِاخْتِلَافِ الْحَالِ. He says, know that this is something which will differ according to your state, according to different states. إن كان مقتدى به يريد أن يبين أن أخذ زاد مباح أو ينوي به عون مسلم أو إغاثة ملحوف ونحو ذلك فالأخذ أفضل. وإن كان منفردا قوي القلب بالله سبحانه يشغله الزاد عن عبادة الله فترك أفضل. So, he says it depends on your state. Like, we were saying, everyone's individual case has to be looked at separately. And he says, if you're someone, he gives some different examples. If you're someone that is followed, or you're taken as an example, so he's talking now about scholars or sheikhs, or the Prophet ﷺ or the Sahaba, people look at your example as something to follow, then he says, it may be better for you to take provision, because you're teaching people the normal way that the Sharia teaches us to behave. Or if you want to help a Muslim, if you don't have any provision with you and you come across Muslims that are in need, you're not going to be able to help them. Yeah? So that could be a good intention, to have wealth or to have other types of provision. In these cases, better to take something with you. They override other aspects. But he says, if you're in a certain state, you're in a certain situation, a certain position in your spiritual progress. In munfaridan means you're alone. You don't have dependents upon you, wife, children, etc. You're someone who's devoting himself for some time to just worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At this stage, it may be better for you, especially if going after rizq is going to preoccupy you from your desire, from your goal of spiritual aspirations. In this case, it may be better for you to leave it and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's a very, very specific case and situation. فَتَفَهَّمْ هَذِهِ الْجُمْلَةَ وَاحْتَفِظْ بِهَذَا رَاشِدًا وَبِاللَّهِ التَّوْفِيقِ. So he says, understand well these principles and take care of what we've said. Now also, I would just like to add, we always have to take into consideration the time and place we're in, and the context of the time we're in. We're not in the same time that Imam al-Ghazali was in. In other words, as Muslims, as a community, as an ummah, we are not in a situation that Imam al-Ghazali was in. In the 5th century of Hijri, Islam was the most powerful force in the world. Islamic civilization was the most powerful and the most advanced civilization in the world. So that was a completely different situation. So we're in a very different situation where Islam is very much in a crisis, under attack. Muslims as an ummah, where we're facing very big challenges. The deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a challenge of Muslims in each generation to establish, is in a much, much different situation. So therefore our priorities are different as well. And then, so someone who's a true Sufi, if people are true Sufis, or claim to be Sufis, they have to be a Sufi ibn waqtihi. That's one of the meanings of that as well, to understand the time you're in. You know, you don't live as if you're living 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago. Yeah? So that comes to the end of the section on rizq and seeking of. So that was the first arid, the first. What do we say we were going to call arid?
There's hindrance in this.
Hindrance. Oh, that's a good one actually. Yeah, hindrance. The first hindrance. So these now is, remember we've gone through the stage of knowledge, tawbah, fighting against the four enemies, the four obstacles, the nafs, the shaitan, the dunya, and the people, the bad company. We've gone through those stages. Now we've gone to a high. We've struggled. We've put down the appetites of the nafs. We've struggled against the traps and tricks of shaitan. We've kept away from bad company and put ourselves into seclusion more and more. And we've tried to take the love of the world away from our heart. These are then the hindrances that are going to come about. The first one is to start having doubts about our rizq. So now he's taking us, Imam al-Ghazali, to the maqam of tawakkul. No, now you've got to have your tawakkul, you've got to have your faith, you've got to have your reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you've made an intention, you want to go jihad fi sabilillah, meaning jihad against on your own personal jihad or whatever type of jihad, it's all mujahada. Abu Hassan al-Nadwi rahimahullah, in his book Islam and the World, he refers to these people who are making this commitment to the deen as people of jihad and ijtihad. People of jihad and ijtihad. So the people who are struggling to be people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, if the Muslims on your road are being attacked, you know, and you sitting in your house and just doing dhikr, you're in a state of disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not in a state of coming closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see what I mean? That's just the point about understanding the time and place that you're in. So if you want to become a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or close to Allah, you have to do what is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not what is displeasing to Him. Not what you think is pleasing to Him, but what He tells us is pleasing to Him in any time and place. So now the person has established themselves on the stage of tawakkul. The next hindrance is al-akhtar wa iradatuha wa qasuduha. So these are now, we're moving into more subtle issues. That's why the discussion on tawakkul was so extended, and those very subtle points were coming out, because we've gone past the initial stages of purification of those more straightforward things, shaitan, the nafs, the desires, hubbud dunya, very easy for us to understand. The more subtle stages, the more difficult stages in a way. So this hindrance is called al-akhtar wa iradatuha wa qusuduha. Now this is linked to akhtar, is linked to what we call things which may be unclear, or we're not sure where the benefit is, or we're not sure what's the best thing to do. There's certain things that we know definitely this is a good thing to do, like the 5 daily prayers. I don't have to ask myself, actually, should I pray Dhuhr today? Or is it better for my deen? It's definitely 100% knowledge. But there are some things I may not be sure about for my deen. Is it better for me to, go and visit my Muslim brother who's in hospital? Or is it better for me to go and pray Jama'ah in the mosque today? I have a choice. I'm not really sure. Both are good, but what's better? These type of things can come up often. and we're not sure what's the best for our deen. Or more, what he's talking about here is things like, I want to start this business. Yeah? Okay, I'm working in a so-and-so place, and I'm finding it's not very conducive to my iman and my deen, and I think I should start my own business so that it will be better for my deen. You know, I'll be able to control my time, I'll go to the prayers on time, and so on. But I'm not sure what's the better for me. You know, I have to do istikhara. And so these type of things where we're not sure, you know, they're both permissible, but what's better for your deen? What's better for your iman? These are the type of things that will come. إنما كفايتها في التفويض فعليك بتفويض الأمر كله إلى الله سبحانه وتعالى وذلك لأمرين. So it says a lot of these issues you have to have tafweed. Tafweed means referring the matter back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Referring the matter back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah? Unfortunately, it normally gives a lot of examples of Imam. It doesn't in this particular section, so we'll try to give some examples as we go along. But tafweed is very important principle, and he'll mention an ayah of Quran. وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. Says one of the prophets, he said, وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. I refer back my affair back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does that mean? Tafweed, it means at some point we put out up our hands and we say Allah knows best. Yeah? Allah knows best. That's what's the meaning of tafweed. It's very important because it's linked to tawakkul as well. It's linked very much to tawakkul. You know? So it says there's two reasons why we have to have tafweed. People may have heard of tafweed in another context, which is aqeedah, where we have interpretation of Quran. Interpretation of Quran, some of the unclear verse of Quran, they can be called tafweed or ta'weed. Tafweed means we don't try to interpret those ayahs, we just say Allah knows best their meaning. Ta'weed is where we put an interpretation on those ayahs of Quran. Yeah, so that's the other context you may have heard of tafweed, which is, you know, we just refer the matter back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أحدهما لطمأنينة القلب في الحال فإن الأمور إذا كانت خطيرة مبهمة لا يدرى صلاحها من فسادها فتكون مضطرب القلب هائمة النفس لا تدري تقع في صلاح أو فساد. So this is the first reason why we have to have tafweed is to get tranquility. Why? Because it says many affairs are unclear. We don't know what's going to be the outcomes, or is it going to be better for us, meaning for our deen. Yeah? But if we keep worrying about them, then we're not going to feel tranquility. So this is why we then say, Allah knows best. You know, I've tried to make the best decision possible, and I put the matter back to Allah, and that way we have tumanina. We get tranquility. فإذا فوضت الأمر كله إلى الله تعالى علمت أنك لا تقع إلا في صلاح وخير. If you had full tafweed, you put the affair back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's very similar to tawakkul in this context, then you would know that Allah will do what is best for you. You know, so this link to istikhara and so on. One of the most strong ayahs of Quran which help us as well, if we keep it in mind in these type of situations, it says in the Quran, فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. When you decide upon something, then trust in Allah. And before that the ayah says, فَعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. This was directly to the Prophet ﷺ, but of course the Quran, even when it's in specific, is always generalizes. It's one of the principles of Quran tafsir. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the Prophet ﷺ, forgive them, فَعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُم, and ask forgiveness for them, meaning the Sahaba, وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ, and include them in your decisions. Shawir from shura. Include them in your decisions, make shura, in other words. Have consultation. So once again, why? The Prophet ﷺ is guided by revelation. Why would he be making shura? It's of course to teach us. This is how Muslims, this is how we make decisions. And the Quran is even more explicit as well. It says, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ, describing the Muslims. Their matter, their affair is by shura between them. They take shura. They have consultation. And the Sahaba, obviously the four Sahaba, the four Khulafa al-Rashidun, this is how they were carrying out government. Shura bainahum. They were taking shura. So if we want to know how to run our affairs, whether it be in our own house, in our own community, in our own town, in our own ummah, is there for us. Amruhum shura bainahum. The Khulafa al-Rashidun have set that very clear example for us. They had a shura, they had a people that they would consult. And who were those people? They were the most knowledgeable people and the most pious people around them. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, in fact I'll tell this story because it relates a lot to the tawakkul issue as well. It's one of the real amazing stories from the life of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. When he was going to Sham, and on the journey they found out, they got news that there's plague in the town. I think he was going to, I can't remember if he was going to Damascus or to Jerusalem, but one of the areas of Sham. They said there's a plague. And Sayyidina Umar had left Medina with a substantial amount of the Muslims with him to go to Sham. And Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, well, his governor, was in Sham, and they heard news there's plague. And so Sayyidina Umar stopped, and some people were advising him to turn back to Medina. And some people were saying to him, we trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why do we want to run from a plague? And once again, within the hadith, we find different interpretable ways of understanding it. There is one hadith which mentions that there's no transmission. There's no transmission of disease. Whereas there's other hadith which mention that if this thing comes to a town, a plague, whoever's in the town should not leave, and whoever's not in the town should not go to the town. And that was actually a very miraculous statement by the Prophet ﷺ, which we know now to be true, But anyway, Sayyidina Umar was not aware of that hadith at that time. That that if it comes to a town, you shouldn't go and you shouldn't come out. So he was trying to decide, and he done an amazing thing. He took shura with his normal people that he took shura with, which were the great Sahaba like Sayyidina Ali and others, the top Sahaba. Then he took shura from the rest of Quraysh, the elders of Quraysh, like the chiefs of the Quraysh as well, not just the great Sahaba. And then he took a third shura of all the wider community as well. So he took 3 levels of shura for that particular, it was such a big, it was something, he was really trying to decide what should be done. And so it's once again, it links up to this thing, see? The tawakkul and the either tie your camel or, you see what I mean? He took shura at 3 levels because some really great Sahaba were saying to him, no, we shouldn't stop. We should just carry on. We're fi sabilillah. We're the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And after taking that 3 levels of shura, he decided to turn back to Medina. You know? So then he turned back to Medina, and once again, I can't remember the Sahabi it was, but and Sayyidina Umar made an amazing statement. He said, I'm running from the qadr of Allah to the qadr of Allah. You know? And then after that, when he'd made that decision and they started moving, someone came and informed him of the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ had said, when the plague comes to a place, a town, you shouldn't go, no one who was in there should leave and no one should go to that town. And he said, Alhamdulillah, that we decided upon what was, in accordance with the Sunnah. So that's how Muslims also decide their affairs through shura. So that's what the ayah says, وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. Take shura when you have to make any decision. So even if it's your own decision in your personal life, for your family, for your community, whichever level, we take shura. Take some consultation with people that have knowledge, piety, etc. Do istikhara. The ayah doesn't mention that, but that's obviously established from the very strong hadith. But then when you decide, then trust in Allah. فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. When you've made the decision, you've done istikhara, you've taken shura, you make the azam, you get azam, you make a decision. Then it says tawakkal ala Allah. Then just trust in Allah. Don't anymore have any type of doubts. So this is tafweed. At that point, when we make a decision, then we say, "Afawwidu amri ila Allah." The affair is now back with Allah. I don't know if there's good or bad in anything that I decide, but I've done my best. I've followed the Sunnah. I've followed the instruction of Quran. I've done istikhara. I've done shura. I've tried my best. I'm not a prophet. I don't get wahi. Yeah, we don't get wahi after the Prophet ﷺ. There's some people nowadays they have such a high estimation of certain sheikhs that they actually want them to guide them in everything that they do, because they believe the sheikh will get all sorts of guidance. There's no revelation after the Prophet ﷺ. If there was, Sayyidina Umar would not have been doing 3 levels of shura to decide on that affair, because if anyone was going to get direct guidance, it would have been him. So, that's when Abu Bakr and Umar, once they went to visit Halima, the witness of the Prophet ﷺ, after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, they went to visit her and found her crying. And they said to her, they thought she was weeping because they had reminded her of the Prophet ﷺ. But she said, no, I weep because the revelation has been cut off. Because revelation has ended. This is an amazing thing if we reflect upon it, that when we have a prophet amongst us, which we don't have anymore after the Prophet ﷺ, there's no prophets, but when you have the prophet amongst people, there's a direct communication from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to people. And this is why Bani Israel was so blessed in their time, because they had continuous chain of prophets. When one prophet would die, there would always be one that takes his place. So they always had this direct link, this direct communication, this direct wahi, revelation. But after the Prophet ﷺ is finished, there's no longer communication. So we just have to try our best. We make our decision based on what we believe is most pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through shura and through istikhara and so on. And then we say, now we trust in Allah. We trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And don't feel after that any type of uncertainty, or maybe actually I should have done that type of thing. That's called what the Prophet ﷺ said, don't say low. فَإِنَّ لَوْ تَفْتَحُ أَبْوَابَ الشَّيْطَانِ. Don't ever say if. We're actually not allowed to say that. A lot of Muslims don't realize. It's actually forbidden by the Prophet ﷺ to say if. Meaning, if I had done that, if only I had done that, if I had done that, this would have happened. We're not allowed to say that. إِنَّ لَوْ تَفْتَحُ أَبْوَابَ الشَّيْطَانِ. Why? Because the if opens up the doors of shaitan. Meaning this is a way for shaitan to get to us. Break down our trust, our tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Break down our iman, our belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is guiding and doing everything that is better. You see what I mean? And to put us into all sorts of anxieties, worries and so on. Then he mentions فتكون آمنا من الخطر مطمئن القلب في الحال وهذه الطمأنينة والأمن وراحة في الوقت غنيمة عظيمة. If someone gets to this level of tafweed and tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will be someone of tranquility, someone of a tranquil heart. Why? Because he's now seeing everything positively. Why? Because you see that everything that has happened has been according to the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And everything that is going to happen is going to be according to the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's no trepidation, no discomfort, no anxiety, no fear, etc. So Imam al-Ghazali says this tranquility is one of the greatest ghanima, one of the greatest bounties that someone can achieve. وكان شيخنا رحمه الله يقول في مجالسه كثيرا دع التدبير إلى من خلقك تسترح. He says our Shaykh used to say very often in his gatherings, forget about planning. Leave the planning for the one who created you, then you'll be more relaxed. Yeah? Leave the planning for the one who created you, you'll be far more relaxed. In other words, if we're always very preoccupied with trying to plan this or plan that, or what's going to happen, I need to do this, I need to do that, we're just going to occupy up all of our time. Yeah? So it's once again about trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وكان شيخنا رحمه الله يقول في مجالس كذا وقد أنشد في ذلك إن من كان ليس يدري أفي المحبوب نفع له أو المكروه لحري بأن يفوض ما يعجز عنه إلى الذي يكفيه الإله البر الذي هو بالرأفة أحسن من أمه وأبيه. Anyone got the English?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
When someone cannot tell whether his benefit resides in what is pleasing or what is unpleasant, it befits him to delegate what he cannot handle to the one who will look after all his needs, the caring deity, the one who is kinder in compassion than his father and his mother.
So, one of the points here in these lines of poetry, someone doesn't know where is the benefit for him. Yeah. Ultimately, we don't know what's going to end up better for us in certain decisions we take. So in that case, it's more befitting for us to designate and trust back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anyway. وَالثَّانِي مِنَ الْأَمْرَيْنِ. So that was the first reason why we have to have tafweed. The secondly, حصول الصلاح والخير في الاستقبال وذلك أن الأمور بالعواقب مبهمة. The second reason we should have this type of tafweed, just relying everything back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and trusting in Him, is because this is how we are going to get good outcomes. Salah. This is actually the way to get the best outcome, what is better for us. Because by doing this, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be guiding us to do things that are better for us. Yeah? As long as we rely upon ourselves, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may give us better, He may not, to teach us if He wants to guide us more. You know? People, we will find this in our own lives. If we just start becoming introspective, which is what this whole study of tasawwuf is supposed to be teaching us. is to examine ourselves all the times. We will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us signs. Like, you know, if you do something and you rely upon yourself, you're very confident. Now I can do this. Is easy for me now. Yeah. So you've forgotten about saying, Inshallah, or Inshallah, Allah make it better. You know, something you just become so confident you can do this. It's no problem. Yeah. You forgot to mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You forgot to ask Allah's help. The thing might go horribly wrong. If it's because we're someone who's struggling in the path of Allah, it might be just because Allah wants to bring you back. He's teaching us, He's helping us. And He's trying to bring us back. Because remember now we're talking about the slightly more higher, the more advanced levels now. People. So these are people that are they're trying to come close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah? Allah may just then give you that. And then something you think this is impossible, this is very difficult. You know, oh Allah help me. This is good. You know, because you're asking Allah's help. Oh Allah, I put the matter back to you, I've got no power over this, then maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might make it so easy for you. You know, so it's all there, signs are teaching us. It happened with the Sahaba in the Battle of Badr. Yeah, they were just against a much superior force in material terms. Yeah? But they had that full tawakkul and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah gave them victory in ways they couldn't even imagine. Angels were flying down from skies and chopping the heads off the disbelievers. In Hunayn, it was the opposite. Because this was after the conquest of Mecca. Now the whole of Quraysh have become Muslim. The Quraysh, the most powerful tribe in Arabia, have now become Muslim. They go to fight this other tribe, Banu Hawazin. And now they're full of confidence. Because now they're the superior force by far. They've got all the big leaders and the clans of Quraysh with them, the Muslims. They've been given victory over Medina and Makkah. You know, so they're going and they're full of confidence. And they're like, you know, so then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turns it against them. The Battle of Hunayn turns against them at the beginning. They're going into this valley all exuberant and really confident and thinking this is no problem now, we are the most powerful people in Arabia. The tribe that they're fighting against ambushes them from the mountains and starts firing arrows and spears down and start causing havoc. And many of those new Muslims then start running that have joined them from the Quraysh. They start fleeing from the battle. And only because the Prophet ﷺ stands firm and the old Sahaba that were with him from before, they stand firm, then they're able to rally back the Muslims and defeat those enemy. But that was once again a lesson for the Muslims. The Quran mentions it. You know, when you were in that battle and you were full of your own strength, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala almost made you be defeated. So these are things that happen just to show us lessons that we have to trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know? So they will happen to us in our lives as well. So he says, yes, so the outcomes of things are unknown to us. فَكَمْ مِنْ شَرٍ فِي صُورَةِ الْخَيْرِ وَكَمْ مِنْ ضُرٍ مِنْ حِلْيَةِ النَّفْعِ. How many things that seem to be outwardly good then turn out to be bad for us? And how many things that seem to be harmful but then they turn out to be better for us? وَكَمْ مِنْ سُمٍّ فِي هَيْئَةِ شُهْدٍ. How many honey actually turns out to be poison? وَأَنْتَ الْجَاهِلُ بِالْأَوَاقِبِ وَالْأَسْرَارِ. We don't know what's going to be the outcome of things. We don't know really at all. فإذا أردت الأمور قطعا وأخذت فيها باختيارك متحكما فما أسرع ما تقع في هلاك ولا تشعر. If you start acting in a way that you take decisions and you don't trust in Allah or put the affair back to Allah or ask for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help, and you just think, no, I want to do this, no, I want to do this, and you're fully decisive in yourself, he says how soon you're going to find yourself in destruction and you won't even realize. ولقد حكي أن بعض العباد كان يسأل الله أن يريه إبليس. He said it's narrated that one particular person, he used to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show him Iblis. Strange dua to ask what this person. فقيل له سل الله العافية. It was said to this person, ask Allah for afiyah, ask Allah for being safe and secure. Don't ask to see Iblis. Why do you want to see Iblis? But this person, he persisted. He said, no, I want to see Iblis. فَأَظْهَرَهُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى لَهُ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted him that request and showed him Iblis. فَلَمَّا رَآهُ الْعَابِدُ قَصَدَهُ بِالضَّرْبِ. فقال له إبليس لولا أرى أنك تعيش 100 سنة أهلكتك وعاقبتك. So this man, when he saw Iblis, he went to try to beat him. He wanted to go and beat him up, which naturally you would do if you ever saw Iblis, I'm sure. So Iblis, he said to this man, it's a very cunning statement he made. He said to him, it's only because I know that you're going to live for 100 years, otherwise I would have beaten you and destroyed you right now. Yeah? And what the man didn't realize that Iblis had then tricked him. So this man afterwards, he starts saying, Inna umri ba'id fa'afal ma urid thumma atub. So he said, I've got 100 years to live, I've got a long life ahead. I don't have to be so strict right now. I'll just enjoy myself a little bit, and then later on I can make tawbah. فَوَقَعَ فِي الْفِسْقِ وَتَرْقِ الْعِبَادِ وَهَلَكَ وَخَسِرَ. So this person ended up falling into doing all sorts of sins and bad things, and ended up in loss. So just showing, we don't know the outcomes of things, how the thing all turned around. He was a righteous person, praying, worshipping, making dua, and suddenly the whole thing turned around against him. ففي هذه ما ينبهك على ترك الحكم في إرادتك. And also in this story we should realize, don't be so decisive about things in your own decisions. Always have tafweed, referring it back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This man said, no, I want to see Iblis, despite people were advising him and everything. وَالْلُجَاجْ فِي مَطْلُوبِكَ وَيُحَذِّرُكَ أَيْضًا طُولَ الْأَمَلِ. This story also gives us a warning about having long hopes in the world as well, putting off tawbah and so on. فَإِنَّهُ الْآفَةُ الْعَظِيمَةُ. This is one of the greatest tribulations, which obviously we covered in the previous sections about having long hopes in the world. وَلَقَدْ صَدَقَ الْقَائِلُ وَلَا يَا نَفْسِ أَن ترضى بقوت تكوني حرة أبدا مني وإياك المطام والأماني فكم أمينة جلبت مني. Translation? 2 lines of poetry.
Beware of lustful desires and cravings, for many a craving has resulted in death.
وأما إذا فوضت أمرك إلى الله سبحانه وسألته أن يختار لك ما هو صلاحك لم تلق إلا الخير والسداد. However, if we were referring all our affairs back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we were asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us at all times and will do what is best for us, then we would definitely be doing the right things and getting the best outcomes. وَلَا تَقَوْ إِلَّا عَلَىٰ الصَّلَاحِ. You would only get good. Meaning, whatever happens in that case, it might even seem bad to us, but it's good for us. It's good for us. Because we done it the correct way. We said, oh Allah, you know best. I don't know what's the outcome of things. I put my affair back to you. And so on. Whatever happens will always be best for you. Even if something happens like, let's say it's a business which collapses or something, it's still best for you. Firstly because you may be getting a huge amount of reward for the sabr that you're having that you don't know about. Secondly, it could be, if you had done the other thing, something worse would have happened than the thing that happened now. Like one of the righteous people said, no matter what tribulation you're in, you can always thank Allah. Because it could have been worse. It could have been much worse. I guarantee none of us will ever have the worst tribulation that some people are having in this world. So we should always be thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without any question. فَفِي هَذِهِ مَا يُنَبِّهُكَ عَلَى تَرْكِ الْحُكْمِ فِي إِرَادَتِكَ. And even that person who's having the worst tribulation in the world somewhere, he should still thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he's not in the hellfire. If he's a Muslim, he's still got enough to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for. But may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make their tribulations easy for us. قال الله تعالى حكاية عن العبد الصالح وأفوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد. We mentioned this ayah of Quran that we mentioned earlier as well. One of the righteous people said, I refer back my affair to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the one who is well aware and looking at his slaves at all times. فَوَقَاهُ اللَّهُ سَيِّئَاتِ مَا مَكَرُوا وَحَاقَ بِآلِ فِرْعَوْنَ سُوءُ الْعَذَابِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved him from the evil of those people that were plotting against him. And the people of Fir'aun became encompassed by a horrible punishment. أما ترى كيف أعقب تفويضه الوقاية كما أعقب تفويضه الوقاية من الأسوأ والنصر على الأعداء وبلوغ المراد فتأمل موافقا. So he says, look at this ayah of Quran, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has linked the tafweed, relating all your matters back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's linked that to having protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from all types of evil and bad things, the sayyat, and has also linked it to having victory and success from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala against one's enemies. فإن قلت بين لنا معنى التفويض وحكمه. So now he's explained basically what we mean by tafweed and how important it is. Now he's just, as usual, as his style of Imam al-Ghazali in this book, then bringing possible questions, first of all, to explain further, and then later, if there's any people that may have refutations, he also then deals with them. But this is just a question to clarify further. He says, if you were to ask me to explain what is the meaning of tafweed and the hukm of it, the ruling of it, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهَا هُنَا فَصْلَيْنْ بِهِمَا يَتَّضِحُ الْكَلَامِ. He says, you should know that there are two sections to this, which will make it very clear to you what is tafweed. أَحَدُهُمَا مَوْضِعُ التَّفْوِيض. The first is the context of tafweed. وَالثَّانِي مَعْنَاهُ وَحَدَّهُ وَضِدُّهُ. And the second aspect is the actual meaning of tafweed, the definition of it, and the opposite. Why they say opposite is because often to understand something, if we know the opposite, we can understand something. أما موضعه فاعلم أن المرادات ثلاثة. First of all, the context. He says, know that intended things, or things that you intend to do, are of three categories. الأول مراد تعلم يقينا أنه فساد وشر لا شك فيه البتة. There's one thing that you may intend to do that you know for a fact that it is bad. Yeah? So you don't need to have tafweed. Yeah? You know for a fact that you're doing something wrong or something that is bad. كالنار والعذاب وفي الأفعال كالكفر والبدعة والمعصية فلا سبيل إلى إرادة ذلك. Things which we know for 100% certainty are bad, like the hellfire, punishment, and in terms of actions that we may want to do, kufr, bid'ah, innovation, ma'siyah, disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no aspect of tafweed in this case. وَالثَّانِي مُرَادٌ تَعْلَمُ قَطْعًا أَنَّهُ صَلَاحٌ. And then the opposite, there's some things we know for 100% fact we have to do or they're good to do. We don't have to do tafweed, such as al-Jannah wal-Iman. You know, you're not going to ask Allah, I don't know if I should have Iman or not. Or Sunnah, should we follow the Sunnah or not? وَنَحْوَ ذَلِكَ فَلَكَ إِرَادَتُهَا بِالْحُكْمِ. These things you should do. You don't have to have tafweed. You don't have to say, oh Allah, I'm not sure if this is the best thing to do, I trust in you, etc. If it's your 5 daily prayers or things like that. لا موضع للتفويض فيه إذ لا خطر فيه. There's no uncertainty, there's no doubt, there's no risk. ولا شك أنه خير وصلاح. والثالث مراد لا تعلم يقينا أن لك فيه صلاح أو فسادا. The third one, and this is where tafweed comes in, is a type of issue where you're not sure for certainty, is there something that's better for you or bad for you? وذلك نحو النوافل والمباحات. These are things which may be nafal or may be mubahat. Should I do umrah this year? Or not? Should I start this business or not, etc. فهذا موضع التفويض. These are the places where once we decide after doing istikhara and shura, etc., then we have to have tafweed. We have to then just rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فليس لك أن تريدها قطعا بل بالاستثناء وشرط الخير والصلاح. These things you should not do in a decisive manner without referring back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you have to have istithna, insha'Allah. شرط الخير والصلاح, ask Allah to make it better for you, and salah. فإن قيدت إرادتك بالاستثناء فهو تفويض وإن أردت دون الاستثناء فهو تمع مذموم منهي عنه. If you don't, in this case, delegate it back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is what the scholars call tama. It becomes tama instead of, which is something which is blameworthy and is forbidden. Tama means, literally it means something you desire or covet. The idea is that you so want this thing, but you're not looking at whether it's better for you or referring it back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فموضع التفويض إذن كل مراد فيه وهو أن لا تستيقن صلاحك فيه. So that is the context where tafweed comes in, is those type of actions where you're not sure if it is better for you, for your deen, to do the thing or not. وأما معنى التفويض فقال بعض شيوخنا هو ترك اختيار ما فيه مخاطرة إلى المختار المدبر العالم بمصلحة الخلق لا إله إلا هو. So it says one of the shuyukh, they said the definition, or the meaning of tafweed is to leave your ikhtiyar in certain things which you can't control the outcomes. So you leave your ikhtiyar in favor of the ikhtiyar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who decides affairs. So you're not sure this thing is it good or bad for me. You can't control the outcomes of things. So instead of you deciding, you leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, meaning by doing istikhara and so on. وعبارة الشيخ أبي محمد السجزي رحمه الله هو ترك اختيار المخاطرة على المختار ليختار لك ما هو خير لك. Similar statement by another scholar is to leave your ikhtiyar, your choice, in things which are unclear, the outcomes. Leave it to the one who is able to decide for you what is better for you. وقال الشيخ أبو عمر رحمه الله تعالى هو ترك الطمع والطمع هو إرادة الشيء المخاطر بالحكم فهذه عبارات المشايخ. And then the final definition by Shaykh Abu Amr, he said, التفويض is ترك الطمع, is not to have tama, this thing, I don't know how to translate it.
An ambitious desire.
Oh, ambitious desire. وطمع هو إرادة الشيء المخاطر بالحكم. So then what is tama is to want something which is of uncertain consequence or uncertain outcomes, but you want it for against any cost. You don't put it back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think that's what they're trying to say. So it says these are the definitions or the meanings that have been expressed by the shayukh. والذي نقوله إن التفويض إرادة أن يحفظ الله تعالى عليك مصالحك فيما لا تأمن فيه الخطأ. So he says, my definition, Imam al-Ghazali himself, my thing is, the meaning of this, the meaning of tafweed is that you wish that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes care of what is of benefit for you in those affairs that you are unable to control. وضد التفويض الطمع, and the opposite of tafweed is tama, this ambitious desire, as one person translates it. Or you could even say greed or covetousness as well. والطمع في الجملة يجري على وجهين أحدهما في معنى الرجاء تريد شيئا لا خطر فيه ولا مخاطرة بالاستثناء وذلك ممدوح غير مذموم كما قال تعالى والذي أطمع أن يغفر لي خطيئتي يوم الدين. So then to understand what is the meaning, because then we understand what is tafweed, the opposite, by its opposite. It says in tama there are also two different ways that it can be understood. One is actually not blameworthy, and is actually acceptable and good. One type of tama. And this is where you want something, you desire something, but something which is good, or something that you're commanded to do. So, for example, in the Quran it says, وَالَّذِي أَطْمَعُ, the thing that I desire, and it's that word tama is used, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me my sins on the Day of Judgment. Obviously this tama is good. If you have a tama, if you have this tama, this desire that Allah forgives you, this is good. وقوله تعالى إنا نطمع أن يغفر لنا ربنا خطايانا, and similarly in another ayah as well, we wish, we desire that Allah forgives us our sins. وهذا القسم ليس مما نحن فيه بسبيل هؤلاء. So it says this tama is not what we're talking about here. Yeah, this is perfectly fine and praiseworthy. والثاني تما مذموم, but the second type, the one that we're talking about, is the one which is blameworthy. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إياكم والتمع فإنه فقر حاضر. The second type, which is blameworthy in this hadith, I mentioned the Prophet said, "Iyyakum wa tama." Beware of tama, beware of greed and covetousness and desire. فَإِنَّهُ فَقْرٌ حَاضِرٌ. Because it is poverty. It is immediate poverty. Or it is poverty right now. In other words, if you've got all these greeds and desires for things, it means right now you're in a state of faqr. You don't feel that you're satisfied, do you? You feel like you're in a state of faqr. So this is the opposite of the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who feel qana'ah. They feel satisfied with what they have from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the time. Yeah? That's why the ulama, they said the true wealthy man is the man of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's a true ghani. Because he's in a state of ghina at the time when he has no need for anything else. He's completely satisfied right now. Because he sees that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him everything that he needs right now. Or whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him is sufficient. He doesn't feel a need for increase. So that is true ghina, that's a true wealth. That's a true feeling of ghina. Because the ghani is the one who has need of nothing. Who does not have need of anything. Even if a person has got millions of pounds, but they still have this tama, they still have this greed for other things, they still, at that moment they're in a state of faqr. They're still in a state of faqr. They're feeling a need for something. You know? I could be quite wealthy, have plenty of money, but I feel I have to have that house in the country as well. That I can go, a holiday house. I've got my house here, nice big house, big transport, fine, no problems. But I need that holiday home. And it can become a real need, it can pop up like. So then you're in a state of faqr. Despite having all of that wealth, you're in a state of faqr. I need that holiday home so, we can go, my family,
Or okay. I need that slightly colder water.
There again, same thing, yeah? It's relative always. Well, you got the holiday home, you got all those things, but, okay, now I'm a millionaire. I've got, but I need my own private jet. I need it because how can I sit with these other people harassing me and waiting in queues?
So just to confirm this, this is like a, what do they call it, an ambitious desire, right? It's the opposite to delegation for Allah.
Yes.
Your affairs. But what if you say, okay, I'm going to work, well, I suppose it doesn't work. I'll work really hard and I want that jet.
Yes.
But I suppose you wouldn't delegate that to Allah because it's not really a need, right?
It's
I think that's like that's over and above.
I'd say the opposite of this tama that we're talking about is not actually tafweed but qana'ah.
Right.
Which is to feel satisfied with what you have. That's probably the direct opposite of that, this particular type of tama that we're talking about. So qana'ah, to just feel satisfied with what you have.
Yeah, rather than wanting.
Yeah, that's the opposite. Tafweed is related in a different way to this. Because what they're saying, the way that tafweed is related is if you have this tama, this real ambitious desire, then you do things without seeking or placing your trust in Allah or trying to do what is better for the deen or what, you don't put it back to Allah, Allah, I'm not sure if I should do this or not. You just do the thing.
Putting it back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is it just doing istikhara and trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and then deciding? It's not like there's something else that you have to do. Because when you do istikhara, you still decide, but you just do the istikhara and then you make your mind up. But it's not a big thing that you do.
Yeah. The only other thing is then you also say in your mind or you make dua or whatever you say, oh Allah, I've made this decision based on the best that I could do, but you know best what's better. So that's called tafweed. Then you're delegating it back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
It's like making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
It's like making dua. It's like recognizing your incapacity in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But with this tama, it's like you think you have the capacity, you go for it, you want this thing. You know, it's not like putting back to.
But you could
Allah
also,
subhanahu wa ta'ala.
like what you're saying is that I really want that, inshallah. You know, you say, I hope Allah give it to me, kind of thing. So you're still saying to Allah, Allah give it to me, but in fact you want that thing, not you want what's best for you.
As long as you recognize your incapacity,
But I suppose in one,
you know, that's the key thing.
yeah, and in one case you're still delegating it back, and if you don't get it, you'll know it's the best for you. And in the other, you're not doing that, right?
In the other one, you're disappointed if you don't get it.
Yeah, yeah. So there's,
Yeah,
So that's not right, is it?
yeah,
exactly.
That's still tamak, but with a kind of lip service to. Is it? I mean,
Yeah, no, that's right.
again, some people do that. That's what people ask for in your dua every day. People ask for, give me more wealth, give me things that they want, isn't it? They're not asking necessarily, give me whatever wealth is best that you think is good for me. So, but that's not wrong, is it? To ask, you know, give me nice things, give me, you know, whatever. People you ask to ask for things that you want as well.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, if you do ask for those things, you must ask for akhirah as well. Because if you make a dua and you ask just for dunya, not for akhirah, that's quite bad. Because it says in the Quran, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا وَمَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. There are some people that ask Allah for the dunya, they will have nothing in the akhirah. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. And there are some who say, oh Allah, give us good in this world and good in the next world and save us from the fire. That's fine. But yeah, so that's just to be careful, obviously. You shouldn't just ask only for dunyawi things, because that's actually then says in the Quran they would have nothing in the akhirah. But yeah, as long as people ask for both, then there's no harm in asking for dunyawi things.
But what I'm understanding from the context of it is that the point about having an excessive desire for dunya things in itself is not the highest position to have. Like
No.
because although it's okay to say, give me, you know, a big house, you know, ultimately that's not a high aim in life, is it? But it's not saying it's wrong, because it's halal and everything. And the point here is that you don't ask for the dunya things particularly, apart from what you need and what's best for you. I mean, if a big house is best for you and you could use it in a good way, maybe fair enough. You know?
Exactly.
Or a jet, you know, maybe a jet to go and give dawah talks all around the country. three talks in a day instead of two. You know?
But then it turns into the whole whisperings of shaitan as well. Right? Oh yeah, may I have 8 houses and I'll do this, I'll do that.
I'll open up a masjid in one of them or something.
And you get them all and then you want to do it.
I think, yeah, no, it's perfectly valid. There's nothing wrong with having a lot of wealth. As long as it's dangerous, it's very dangerous. And a lot of people, a lot of ulama are very, scared of it as well, having a lot of wealth, because it is one of the most things that takes you to the hellfire. Because then you really have to give the rights to that wealth, you know. You have to then spend it in the fi sabilillah as well. You know, you really question. So it is very dangerous. But I think they're all valid points, and I think the key thing, asking for things of the world, things like a big house is actually probably, in the past they would have said is more of a necessity than, having constrained living circumstances like you often do in these countries where like properties are so expensive. That's actually can be considered quite a fitna in the deen as well. So it's good for people to, I don't think that's wrong to ask for, but to ask for then, massive mansions or more houses or things, beyond and obviously more than what you need is maybe.
It depends on the intention, I'd say, because if your intention of a big house is to show off to people,
of course, that's true.
But if your intention is to have an easy, comfortable living and have a room which you can make into a prayer room, for example, so for the good.
That's valid. I agree with that. I don't have no problem with that.
I think how I think is that if you are fulfilling all the requirements which is asked by the religion, Islam, right? And you're not particularly asking, I want a private job, I want a big house, But again, and if it comes easily, after fulfilling everything, and whatever you get more, you are fulfilling again from that, the portions which you are supposed to. And I don't see any harm.
Yeah.
I think the main difference, I think, is that what's your aim in it? Because, that's if the risk is going to be coming anyway, the question is, what's your niyyah in your obtaining things? Because if your aim is that you want to just enjoy the luxuries of this world, that's one thing. If your aim is to show off to other people, or if your aim is to have freedom and peace of mind and comfort to make you free from worrying, so that you can concentrate on worshipping, that's another aim as well. Like if your space is too small and you're crowded in, you can't necessarily have the privacy that you need to contemplate and do dhikr. Maybe it's good to have a bigger extra room to do that. If that's what your aim is, then it would be much better than just to say that, if you say that I've fulfilled my basic needs, and whatever else I could get that's halal is fine, that seems lower aim than purely give me what will aid my akhirah. Whichever means I need to aid my akhirah, give me that. And if you've got a lot of money, and you spend that money in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that would be better than saying, I've fulfilled my basic needs, I've given a certain portion to dawah and Islamic work, and the rest of it I'll use and enjoy it and go on nice holidays, etc. That is not saying that's wrong, but that maybe is not as good as the other one. I don't know. I think that's what I would imagine.
I think it's valid, yeah, definitely. It's all to do, like with intentions, orientation. But, yes, it's definitely true. But if someone just wants to indulge more and more luxuries of the world, it's never ending, And the way, obviously, this sort of consumeristic society is structured is never ending anyway. The more luxury goods you get, the more you can. It's never ending, isn't it? So you want to get to a stage you want a private jet. Ultimately, a person would want to have their own small island or something, wouldn't they? That's like considered the top. If you're a billionaire, you have your own little island, your own private jet. Make your own small Jannah, isn't it? Some people do have, but very few.
An example would be like, say, clothes that you wear.
Yes.
Say if you're a teacher or a sheikh or something, but if you wore clothes that people look like, say if we wore clothes that people generally look down upon because they're cheap, and that affects your credibility as somebody who's teaching people. Would that be a valid reason? It's not your intention whatsoever that you want to have expensive clothes, but it could be a choice to make in order to obtain credibility in certain context.
Yeah, this is a very good question, and it would depend who you're dealing with, like who you're doing dawah to. If you're someone who's engaged in teaching or dawah, if you're moving among certain types of sectors of society where that would be the case, then definitely it would be valid for you to then wear more expensive clothes, etc. That so it would help you in your dawah. So it would very much depend on who you're moving amongst and what you're trying to do, because that would definitely be the case. But it's a slippery slope. I would say it's a very slippery slope. Because this is the one thing, and Imam al-Ghazali mentions this as well, that really takes shuyukh astray. Many scholars are going to fall down this slippery slope. That they, without realizing it, maybe they will start getting more and more into the luxuries of the dunya, but they're always being justified by these type of justifications. So someone does have to be really careful. So first and foremost, we have to save ourselves. First of all, save yourself before trying to save others. But if you feel secure enough, or so on, then if that's the case, then you have to do da'wah. Then it's important, obviously, to be presentable as well.
But there is another side of that, what you are saying. Instead of Parai Maa, you go to Ralph Lauren, that in our religion, or it depends with whom you are dealing, sometimes, like plenty of times if you see in the society, that if you are rich, very rich, or rich, and you are having a life which is very simple, and if you are a Muslim, you are doing according to religion, then you are praised more by others. Look at this man. Look at this family. They are so rich, they are not proud, and they are so simple in living, in everything. So that is another side which I have come across,
It's true.
people praising them.
I think, like you're saying, it's all about the intention, like the state of the person who has who goes into the desert with nothing. That's what he does, isn't it? But you could easily, your aim is to please people by showing them that you live simply, rather than showing them that you live in a wealthy way. I think there's a lot of complications to it. So probably better is just to think about yourself, reflect on these issues, and choose what you think is better for your akhirah, regardless of what anyone else thinks. In which case, this example of the sheikh who feels that he needs to wear expensive clothes, that's probably not the right motive to do it. He should just, I don't know. It's very difficult to, like you say, to detach your own emotions.
It's very difficult because the sheikh is doing dawah and he feels he has to wear very nice clothes, expensive clothes even, because that will attract more people to the deen, which probably is true. But for that particular sheikh, it may end up being more of a tribulation, unless he really has purified himself.
It's just that I've seen most sheikhs that I've come across, they do wear not very expensive clothes, but with high quality, not ordinary, whatever they're wearing is usually of a good quality. I've noticed that. More expensive than the average. And there must be a reason for that, I don't know.
I think there is a reason. I mean, traditionally, if you sit with ulama, they will stress that, it's you have to be presentable and things.
Akram is very simple, isn't
No,
It's like
It's definitely not across the board. In Syria, the shuyukh, they tend to wear like jubbas like this, and they'll definitely be smart and everything, but Syrian people generally, they value that very much, being smart and clean and everything. It's part of their culture anyway, so might be less so in the subcontinent, I don't know.
As you say, it depends on the intention and the niyyah. If you are wearing even good clothes with this niyyah, intention, that I'm going more presentably to attract people more towards my religion. And you can afford it with the right means, that is also. And you don't feel very proud or, takabbur or in that because I'm like that. That is the difference. So all the things depends on the niyyah, your intentions, what you are. And as Shaykh Sahib says, if you are purified already and you understand it, the plenty of times, you go on the slippery way.
Leave it there, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Sorry we've gone a bit late, I think we lost the time. Jazallahu anna sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ahlu. Jazallahu anna sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ahlu. Jazallahu anna sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ahlu. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen. Alhamdulillah.